This video is not just about guns, it's about all types of weapons. Beginning with these, when you take a martial arts class, you learn that hands and elbows and knees, almost any hard point on the human body, can be used as a weapon. With only a few seconds of instruction, you can learn to cause brain damage or even death with just one knuckle aimed at this vulnerable spot here. Frightening, isn't it? What I hope you're going to get from this video is that yes, you absolutely do have the right to own and use any type of weapon. These are chemical and biological weapons, deadly even in tiny amounts. Anthrax, chlorine gas, mustard gas, cyanide, plague, sarin, ricin, polonium, VX, Novichok. Don't worry, they're all fake. As I've mentioned in previous videos, we humans require property. Our peaceful survival in a civilization requires that we have the right to claim, own, use, trade, and dispose of property. Without the concept of property, we are reduced to the level of the lower animals, just taking from nature and from each other by force. We humans are no longer equipped to survive on the animal level of brute force. We've lost the tough hide, the fangs, claws, venom, and poison quills, and 100 other specialized adaptations. We survive by reason, and for that we require the freedom to act on our own judgment. We must be able to keep and trade the product of our labor, and we must respect the right of all of our neighbors to do the same. And as with all rights, no one can give it, no one can alter it, and no one can take it away. And that means all objects and substances. It doesn't mean just some. There is no one above us who decides which particular things we have a right to own and use. Rights are a principle. Nothing is off limits. No one has the authority to impose limits on me. And here comes the very interesting part. While I have the right to own and use them, I don't have the right to use them in a way that would harm others. There is no such thing as a right to violate someone's rights. I only have the right to use physical force in defense and retaliation against others, and only as needed. Once I go beyond that, I become aggressive. I will have crossed the line. This is the difference between the defensive and offensive use of force. Note the word use. Just owning them and trading them is not harmful. It's how I use them that can become harmful. That much is obvious, but what is not obvious is that I also don't have the right to threaten harm to others. Here's how a threat works. Don't move or I'll kill you. He's still alive and physically unharmed, but he knows that I will harm him if he tries to get his wallet back. The threat of physical force means that the victim fears for his life and is unable to act on his own judgment. That's a violation. So these two, actual physical harm and the threat of physical harm, are both violations of rights. Don't worry, it's a fake. So if I'm going to own anything, even something as innocuous as this, I have no right to harm or even threaten others with it, which means I've got to take responsibility for my own actions. Notice that I'm doing this out here. Woohoo! In the open. Not here where I could harm others and their property. Now another thing to consider is that there are times when I'm not capable of being responsible for my own actions as I was as a child. Children need to have someone watch over them and prevent them from accessing those objects and substances they cannot be trusted with. Be sure to watch videos 12 through 15 for that. This is perhaps the most common deadly weapon. If I drive this around anywhere near others and I'm not capable of doing so responsibly, I become a threat and others are within their rights to stop me. Alright, time for an extreme example. Suppose I build one of these in my garage. I have the right to acquire and own anything, don't I? Well, as I've just explained, so long as I don't use it in a harmful manner, which would include storing it in a condition that presents a threat. You get the idea. It's a threat to everyone for miles around. There's no way to escape things that go bang. They are sudden and lethal. You could even argue that the nuclear fallout this produces is a threat to the entire world. Now this gets very interesting. When does my action of storing or using an object or substance become a threat? How dangerous would it have to be and how irresponsible would I have to be, in order for it to be a threat? Good thing that's a fake. How much protection should I ensure in order to reduce the threat to an acceptable level? How large a piece of land do I need in order not to disrupt my neighbor's peaceful enjoyment of his land while I play with one of these on my land? Obviously, I don't own a big enough piece of land, which means I simply cannot exercise that right. And if it ever becomes a question, that's why we need judges and laws and police. The important point about a free society is that the laws must not presume guilt. A person must not be judged by the law as guilty of evil intent and expected to prove his innocence. There is no way to prove a negative. There is no such thing as evidence of the non-commission of a crime, and no such thing as evidence of the non-intent to commit one. There is only evidence that would disprove the allegation of such. For example, there could be evidence that my piece of land was so large that no one could possibly be harmed by me or my weapons. This is why the laws of America were founded on the presumption of innocence, and to a large extent they still are. So ideally, the law should never say, you can't own one of those because we don't trust you to use it responsibly. Instead, the law can only say, your action is threatening and you must stop, meaning the manner in which you are storing or wielding that weapon constitutes a threat to others. So it's improper to outlaw property. You certainly can't outlaw hands. It is only proper to outlaw the initiation of physical force and the threat of it. The essence of this principle appears in the Second Amendment of the American Constitution. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Unfortunately, it's poorly written, vaguely refers to a militia, and nobody can agree on what it really means. I won't spend any more time here on the details of proper laws because I want to focus instead on prevention. I'll just mention that familiar phrase, when guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns, which means the bad guys are going to get their hands on guns no matter what, and the rest of us will be defenseless. The counterpart to that is, let every man be armed. In other words, the bad guys won't dare to start a fight for fear of being outgunned. Oh, a couple of other points. You might hear the claim that weapons should be outlawed because it would be a violation of your rights if you were allowed to hurt yourself. Now, this is just lunacy. It's not possible to force yourself to act against your own judgment. Take all the time you need. One other claim you might hear is that it should be the task of government to prevent accidents. And how far do you go with that? Require everyone to remain strapped in bed at all times because no one can be trusted to walk on two legs? No, the nanny state is a violation of rights. Everyone needs to be held responsible for his own actions. Now, having made the claim that simple ownership and trade of weapons is not harmful or even threatening, and that everyone has the right to own and trade whatever weapons he likes, I want to take a moment to express my sorrow for those who have been victims of school shootings and other mass murders, as well as the friends and family of those killed. In a country such as America, where gun violence is so prevalent, nearly everyone knows of someone who has been killed by a gun. I certainly do. And that, of course, is my primary reason for this video. So, recognizing that it is proper to outlaw only harmful and threatening actions, this means that in a truly free country, anyone should be able to buy and own any sort of weapon he likes, plus use them responsibly for target practice, hunting animals, and defending himself and his loved ones. And now we come to the big question. How do we achieve peace of mind? Meaning, how can we ensure that weapons will be used only by responsible people and will not fall into the wrong hands? How can we ensure that the law never needs to intervene? Well, absolute peace of mind is asking a lot, and I'm certain that it is unobtainable, but we can strive for it. Here's how. If you've watched the previous videos, you've seen this, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions I agreed to upon purchase of my property. These run with the land, which means each new owner must agree to them. The purpose of these is to keep the neighborhood safe and attractive, and thus maximize property values. Ideally, instead of expanding the laws, my neighbors and I would add to our CC&Rs, specifying limits on the type and number of weapons, the type and quantity of ammunition, explosives, storage facilities, and so on that we were willing to accept, if any. Once approved, the updates then run with the land until enough people want to tighten or loosen them, and we vote again. Anyone who dislikes or refuses to honor the current agreement can sell his house and move away in search of a neighborhood more to his liking. If we feel so uncomfortable around dangerous items, we could agree to disarm ourselves completely. Everything in my garage is dangerous. This is the box cutter knife used by the 9/11 hijackers. We could rid ourselves of everything flammable, explosive, corrosive, caustic, reactive, infectious, toxic, and whatever else you can think of. We could go overboard and forbid ourselves of such things as stationery. I've had my share of paper cuts. How much are we willing to deprive ourselves? How miserable do we want to make our lives? And most important, do we want to let it be known that we have disarmed ourselves? Do we want the murderers of the world to know that we can't shoot back? It would be like wearing a target. What? Call the police and hope they arrive before the bullets start to fly? Certainly we don't want anyone setting off a big bomb, and we probably wouldn't even feel comfortable with anyone keeping the components of a bomb in his garage. I wouldn't want my neighbors concocting any nasty biological weapons, but we still want to be able to defend ourselves adequately. We still want to have sufficient weapons and ammunitions and so on. Fake. So we can come to our own agreement on the number and types of weapons we want to limit. Many people will accept small handguns, but want to ban large capacity magazines, automatic weapons, and modifications that make guns more automatic, hollow point bullets, and plastic guns you can make yourself. In our own communities, we should be able to come to an agreement on the concealed carry versus open carry debate, and whether weapons should be unloaded when transported, and so on. We can also come to agreement on the degree of weapons training we want to insist upon. Certainly any rational gun owner is going to take lessons before he handles firearms, but we could specify in the agreements that a certificate of completion of an approved class must be obtained, perhaps with an annual renewal. And this is probably the most controversial part. Because we've seen that it is the mentally unstable people who pose the worst threat, we could insist on some sort of psychological examination. After all, when a shooting appears on the news, the first thing we want to know is, who was that guy? Was he crazy? Was anyone paying attention? How did we let this happen? Now, this is an important point. CCNRs are useful not just in residential neighborhoods, but in business districts too. We can insist that gun shops and all types of arms dealers accept restrictions on the sale of weapons to children and the mentally incompetent. The owners of those shops have children too and are equally upset when a shooting occurs. The gun shop owner also seeks peace of mind. You're probably looking at these and thinking that many city governments permit only certain people to buy and use pyrotechnics, such as the professionals who put on a show. Homeowners are presumed to be too irresponsible, and that's the problem. A municipality blurs the distinction between laws and agreements and does everything by law, laws that presume guilt. My neighbors and I might decide we want to enjoy all sorts of fireworks, or we might decide that we want to draw a line somewhere. That is our right. And the same with guns. What I hope you got from this video is, first, you absolutely do have the right to own and trade any sort of property, and you do have the right to store, transport, and use property in a non-harmful, non-threatening way, because your life requires it. Second, that preventative laws are not the answer. They are immoral. Outright confiscation by government is wrong. It's stealing. It's a violation of inalienable rights. It's the presumption of guilt. And third, the solution to gun violence is to take control of the situation. We can prevent it in our own communities by agreement. I look forward to the day when I can proudly say the members of my community have taken all reasonable steps to prevent gun violence. How about your neighborhood?